A nurse lived the busy routine of a hospital. One day she receives a powerful businessman as a patient. While analyzing his tests, she notices unusual patterns. What she whispers in his ear next will change their lives forever. Before hearing this thrilling twist, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The distinct scent of antiseptic hung in the air as Emily hurried through the bustling corridors of St. Mary's Hospital. Her quick footsteps echoed on the linoleum floor, blending with the constant hum of voices, machine beeps, and the occasional announcement over the PA system. With her brown hair tied up in a practical bun and wearing her spotless light blue uniform, she exuded an aura of efficiency and determination. At 28, Emily was already known as one of the most dedicated nurses in the hospital. Her passion for her work was evident in every gesture, every comforting word whispered to a frightened patient, every procedure performed with pinpoint precision. Yet behind her lively brown eyes, there was a shadow of worry. The mounting bills at home, her younger brother who relied on her to continue his studies, and the increasingly distant dream of one day becoming a doctor. That Tuesday morning, Emily's shift began like any other. She checked charts, distributed medications, and changed dressings with her usual efficiency. However, fate had other plans for that seemingly ordinary day. "Emily?" The urgent voice of Daniel, one of the resident doctors, cut through the air. "We need you in the ER, now." Without hesitation, Emily ran toward the emergency wing, her heart racing with the familiar adrenaline of a critical situation. When she arrived, she was met with a scene of controlled chaos. A team of paramedics had just brought in a middle-aged man, apparently in serious condition. "What do we have here?" Emily asked, already putting on gloves and approaching the stretcher. "Male 55, sudden collapse during a business meeting," replied one of the paramedics, his voice tense. He had seizures on site and lost consciousness on the way here. Emily observed the patient. Despite his critical state, it was impossible not to notice the expensive suit and the gold watch on the man's wrist. This was no ordinary patient. Clearly, he was someone important. "Name?" she asked, already starting emergency procedures. "William Thompson," answered a female voice behind her. Emily turned and saw an elegant woman in her 30s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a piercing gaze. There was something in her posture that made Emily feel instantly uneasy. "I'm Victoria, his stepdaughter," the woman continued, her voice surprisingly calm given the circumstances. "He's the CEO of Thompson Enterprises. Please do whatever it takes." Emily nodded, turning her attention back to William. Over the next few minutes, the team worked tirelessly to stabilize him. Tests were ordered, medications administered, and slowly his condition began to stabilize. Hours later, with William Thompson finally out of danger and transferred to the ICU, Emily allowed herself a moment to pause. Leaning against the corridor wall, she closed her eyes for a moment, letting the tension of the last few hours dissipate. "Nurse?" Victoria's voice brought her back to reality. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" Emily straightened up, watching the woman approach. There was something in the way Victoria moved, in the calculated coldness of her gaze, that set Emily's instincts on edge. "Of course, ma'am, how can I help?" Victoria smiled, a gesture that didn't reach her eyes. "I want to thank you for what you've done for my stepfather. I know he's in good hands here." "We're doing our best," replied Emily, as professional as ever. "Dr. Silva will be here shortly to discuss his case with you in more detail." "Excellent," said Victoria, her gaze wandering down the hallway before returning to Emily. "You know my stepfather is a very important man. I'm sure you understand the need for discretion in this situation." Emily frowned slightly. "Of course. Ma'am, the privacy of all our patients is a priority." "Great." Victoria smiled again, this time pulling an envelope from her designer bag. "This is for you, a small token of gratitude for your dedication." Emily looked at the envelope, feeling a mix of surprise and discomfort. "That's not necessary, ma'am. I'm just doing my job." "I insist," said Victoria, practically forcing the envelope into Emily's hands. "Consider it an incentive to continue taking such good care of my stepfather." Before Emily could protest again, Victoria had already walked away, her heels echoing down the hallway. Alone, Emily stared at the envelope in her hands, an uneasy weight settling in her stomach. That night, when she got home, Emily couldn't shake the incident from her mind. Sitting at the small kitchen table, she opened the envelope, revealing a considerable amount of cash. It was more than she earned in a month. Em? Her brother Ethan's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Everything okay? You look worried. Emily forced a smile, quickly hiding the envelope. It's fine, Ethan. Just tired from my shift. How was school today? As Ethan enthusiastically talked about his day, Emily found herself thinking about William Thompson and his enigmatic stepdaughter. There was something about the situation that didn't add up, a puzzle whose pieces she couldn't yet see clearly. That night, lying in bed, Emily made a decision. Tomorrow she would return the money and dig deeper into William Thompson's case. Her intuition screamed that there was much more to this story than met the eye, and she was determined to uncover the truth. What Emily didn't know was that this decision would place her at the center of a much larger and more dangerous plot than she could have imagined. A plot that would test not only her skills as a nurse, but also her courage, her integrity, and her resolve to do the right thing, no matter the cost. The day dawned gray over New York, as if the sky reflected the unease Emily felt as she headed to St. Mary's Hospital. The envelope with the money weighed heavily in her bag, a constant reminder of the strange interaction with Victoria, William Thompson's stepdaughter. When she arrived at the hospital, Emily went straight to the ICU. Her eyes scanned the beds until they landed on the imposing yet fragile figure of William Thompson. She approached cautiously, checking the monitors and jotting down his vitals. How is he? The deep voice of Dr. Silver, the head of the ICU, startled her. Stable, doctor, replied Emily, recovering quickly. Blood pressure normalized. Good oxygen levels, but he still hasn't regained consciousness. Dr. Silver furrowed his brow, examining the chart. Interesting. The tests don't show anything conclusive. It's as if his body is fighting something we can't identify. Emily hesitated for a moment before speaking. Doctor, I noticed something strange yesterday. Mr. Thompson's stepdaughter, Victoria, she seemed indifferent to the situation, and she tried to give me money. The doctor raised his eyebrows. Money for what? She said it was a thank you, but Emily bit her lip, uncertain. Something doesn't feel right. Dr. Silver sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Emily, I know you care about the patients, but we have to be careful with accusations. The Thompson family is powerful. We can't get involved in personal matters. Emily nodded, but the feeling that something was wrong only grew. She decided she needed to investigate further, even if discreetly. Throughout the day, Emily closely observed the visitors to William. Concerned businessmen, serious-looking lawyers, and, of course, Victoria. The stepdaughter arrived in the mid-afternoon, bringing with her an air of sophistication and an expensive perfume that seemed out of place in the sterile atmosphere of the hospital. How is he? Asked Victoria, her tone more of obligation than concern. No significant changes, replied Emily, studying the woman's reaction. Would you like to stay with him for a while? Victoria hesitated for a moment. Of course, of course. Just a moment. Emily stepped away, pretending to organize some medications, but keeping Victoria in her line of sight. She saw when the stepdaughter leaned over William, whispering something in his ear. Then, to her surprise, Victoria took a small vial from her bag and poured a few drops into a cup of tea she had brought. It's a special tea, Victoria explained, noticing Emily's gaze. From our home, I believe it might help him recover faster. Emily forced a smile. How thoughtful of you. But we need to be careful with what we administer to patients. I'll need to check with the doctor first. A flash of irritation crossed Victoria's face, but was quickly replaced by a forced smile. Of course, I understand. I just want the best for him. After Victoria left, Emily picked up the teacup, hesitating. Her instincts told her something was wrong, but she couldn't simply accuse someone without proof. She decided to save the tea for later analysis, just in case. At the end of her shift, Emily headed to the hospital pharmacy. There she found Peter, a pharmacist with whom she had developed a friendship over the years. "Peter, I need a favor," she said, glancing around to make sure they were alone. "Can you analyze this for me? Discreetly." Peter looked curiously at the vial Emily handed him, containing a sample of the tea. "What is this?" "I'm not sure," admitted Emily, "but I think it might be related to Mr. Thompson's condition. Can you identify if there's anything unusual in it?" Peter nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. "So I'll do my best, but it'll take a few days for a full analysis." Emily thanked him, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. She was taking the first steps in an investigation that could have serious consequences. As she left the hospital, Emily was surprised by a call from her brother, Ethan. You won't believe it," he exclaimed, his voice overflowing with excitement. "I've been selected for an exchange program in the United States." Emily's heart sank. On one hand, she was immensely happy for her brother. On the other, she knew they didn't have the financial means to cover the costs of an international trip. "That's amazing, Ethan," she said, trying to hide the worry in her voice. "Let's talk more about this when I get home, okay?" Hanging up the phone, Emily felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The bills, her brother's dream, the mystery surrounding William Thompson, it all seemed to converge, testing her limits and her integrity. That night at home, Emily hugged her brother, sharing his joy but also gently explaining the financial difficulties they were facing. "Don't worry, Em," said Ethan, his eyes shining with determination. "I'll get a part-time job. We'll make it work." Emily smiled, proud of her brother's maturity. As she watched him walk away to study, her thoughts returned to the envelope of money Victoria had given her. For a brief moment, the temptation to use that money to help her brother crossed her mind, but she quickly dismissed the idea. She knew that money represented something wrong, possibly even dangerous. Lying in bed that night, Emily reflected on the day's events. The mystery surrounding William Thompson, Victoria's suspicious behavior, Ethan's dream. It all swirled in her mind, forming a complex puzzle. She knew she was getting involved in something potentially dangerous, but she also knew she couldn't simply ignore her suspicions. Someone could be in danger, and she had a moral duty to uncover the truth. With that resolution in mind, Emily finally fell asleep, unaware that the coming days would bring even greater challenges. Her journey to uncover the truth was just beginning, and she would need all her courage, intelligence, and compassion to navigate the dangers ahead. Dawn brought with it a renewed determination for Emily. As she prepared for another day at the hospital, her mind buzzed with questions and theories about William Thompson's case. She knew she needed to act cautiously, but she also felt the urgency to uncover the truth before it was too late. Upon arriving at St. Mary's Hospital, Emily was immediately approached by Dr. Laura, one of the most respected doctors on the team. "Emily, I need to talk to you," Laura said, her tone serious. "It's about Mr. Thompson." Emily's heart raced. Did something happen? Dr. Laura led her to an empty room before responding. "His latest test results are strange. There are changes that don't align with his initial clinical condition. It's as if he's being, well, I don't want to use the word poisoned, but..." "Poisoned?" Emily repeated, her suspicion growing stronger. "Dr. Laura, I noticed something strange yesterday. His stepdaughter Victoria brought him some tea and tried to give it to him. I stopped her, but..." The doctor frowned. "That's a serious accusation, Emily. We need to be sure before we do anything." "I know," Emily nodded. "That's why I asked Peter from the pharmacy to analyze a sample of the tea. Discreetly, of course." Dr. Laura seemed to ponder for a moment. "Good initiative, but we need to be extremely careful. The Thompson family is powerful and influential. If we're wrong, and if we're right," Emily countered, her voice filled with concern. "We can't just ignore this." "You're right," Laura agreed after a sigh. "I'll request some additional tests, things we wouldn't normally do. In the meantime, keep an eye out. Anything suspicious, let me know immediately." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. As she left the room, she nearly collided with Daniel, the resident doctor. "Hey, watch it!" he exclaimed, grabbing her shoulders to prevent her from falling. "Are you okay, Emily? You seem worried." For a moment, Emily considered sharing her suspicions with Daniel. They had always had a good working relationship, and he was known for his sharp intelligence. However, something made her hesitate. "I'm fine, just a bit tired," she replied, forcing a smile. "Lots of patients to take care of, you know how it is." Daniel studied her for a moment, as if trying to decipher something in her expression. "If you say so. But you know you can count on me if you need anything, right?" "Of course, thank you." "Daniel," Emily replied, already heading toward the ICU. Throughout the day, Emily divided her attention between her regular duties and closely observing everything happening around William Thompson. She noticed that Victoria appeared again, this time accompanied by a man in a suit, who was introduced as the family's lawyer. Discreetly, Emily moved closer to listen to the conversation. "We need to act fast, Victoria," the lawyer said in a low voice. "If he doesn't sign the papers soon, the whole plan will fall apart." "I know that," Victoria hissed, clearly irritated. "But how do you expect me to get him to sign when he can barely open his eyes?" Emily felt a chill run down her spine. What papers were these, and why the rush? Her shift was almost over when Peter, the pharmacist, discreetly called her. "Emily, you need to see this," he said, leading her to an isolated corner. "That sample you gave me, I found traces of a very unusual substance. It's a compound that, in small doses, causes symptoms similar to what Mr. Thompson is experiencing." Emily's heart raced. "Are you sure?" Peter nodded gravely. "Absolutely. But Emily, this substance is extremely rare and expensive. It's not something just anyone would have access to." The implications of this revelation were terrifying. If Victoria was indeed poisoning her stepfather, she had powerful resources and connections at her disposal. That night, upon arriving home, Emily found Ethan anxious, holding a letter. "The scholarship response came," he exclaimed, his eyes shining with anticipation. With trembling hands, Emily opened the envelope. Her heart sank as she read the contents. Ethan had been accepted, but the scholarship only covered part of the costs. They would still need a significant amount to make the dream a reality. "So?" Ethan asked, his voice full of hope. Emily forced a smile, not wanting to disappoint her brother. "It's great news, Ethan. We'll figure it out, okay? I promise." As she hugged her brother, Emily felt the weight of her worries grow. On one side, the mysterious and potentially dangerous situation at the hospital. On the other, her brother's future and her own aspirations. Lying in bed that night, Emily couldn't sleep. Her mind was filled with conflicting thoughts. She knew she was getting involved in something much bigger than she had initially imagined. The evidence pointed to an elaborate scheme, possibly involving a fortune. For a brief moment, the thought of the money Victoria had offered crossed her mind. It would be so easy to accept, to use it to help Ethan, but Emily quickly pushed the idea away. She knew she couldn't compromise her integrity, no matter how tempting it was. With renewed determination, Emily decided that the next morning she would confront Dr. Laura with the new information. They needed to act, and fast. What Emily didn't know was that her actions had already caught the attention of powerful people. As she finally fell asleep, shadowy figures moved behind the scenes, plotting ways to silence any threat to their plans. The day had barely dawned when Emily arrived at St. Mary's Hospital, determined to share her findings with Dr. Laura. The ICU hallway was eerily quiet, as if the hospital itself was holding its breath, anticipating the events to come. Emily found Dr. Laura in her office, hunched over a stack of medical records. The doctor looked up, immediately noticing the serious expression on the nurse's face. "Emily, what's wrong?" Laura asked, gesturing for her to come in and close the door. "Doctor, we have a serious problem," Emily began, her voice low but firm. "The pharmacist analyzed the tea sample. He found traces of a toxic substance, rare and expensive." Laura paled. "Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely. And there's more," Emily continued, recounting the conversation she had overheard between Victoria and the lawyer. As Emily spoke, Laura's expression shifted from shock to grim determination. "This is very serious, Emily. If what you're saying is true, we're dealing with an attempted murder." "What should we do?" Emily asked, feeling the weight of the situation. "First, we need to protect Mr. Thompson," Laura replied, standing up. "I'll order a change in the visitation and meal protocols. Nothing enters that room without being checked." "Twice." Meanwhile, we need to gather more evidence before involving the authorities. Emily nodded, feeling a mix of relief at being taken seriously and apprehension for what was to come. What about Victoria? For now, we'll act normally, Laura instructed. We don't want to alert her that we suspect anything. But keep an eye out, Emily. Any suspicious movement, let me know immediately. As she left the office, Emily felt lighter, as if she had shared part of the burden she was carrying. However, that relief was short-lived. As she turned the corner, she ran into Daniel, the resident doctor, chatting animatedly with none other than Victoria. "Ah, Emily," Daniel called out, smiling. "Come here. I want to formally introduce you to Mrs. Victoria Thompson." Emily forced a smile approaching the pair. Victoria studied her with a penetrating gaze, as if trying to read her thoughts. "We've already met, haven't we, nurse?" Victoria said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Emily has been so dedicated to caring for my stepfather." "Just doing my job," Emily replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. "And doing it very well," Daniel added, his tone complimentary. "Emily is one of the best nurses we have." Victoria smiled, but the gesture didn't reach her eyes. "I imagine so. By the way, Emily, I've been thinking I'd like to make a substantial donation to the hospital as a thank you for the care given to my stepfather. Perhaps you could help me direct those funds in the best way." Emily felt her heart race. Was this a trap? An attempt at bribery? Or just a genuine gesture of gratitude? "That's very generous of you, Mrs. Thompson," Emily replied carefully, "but matters related to donations are usually handled by the hospital administration." "Oh, but I insist that you be involved," Victoria pressed, her smile widening. "After all, who better to know the real needs of the hospital than someone who works on the front lines?" Before Emily could respond, the shrill sound of an alarm cut through the air. It was the ICU alert. "Mr. Thompson!" Daniel exclaimed, already running toward the room. Emily followed immediately, her heart racing. When they reached the room, they found William Thompson in the midst of a seizure, his body convulsing violently on the bed. "He's in status epilepticus," Daniel shouted, already initiating emergency procedures. "Emily, 10 milligrams of diazepam, now." As they worked frantically to stabilize William, Emily couldn't help but notice Victoria's reaction. The woman remained at the door, her face a mask of concern, but her eyes seemed calculating, almost satisfied. Minutes that felt like hours passed before they finally managed to control the seizure. William Thompson was stable again, but clearly more weakened than before. "What happened?" Dr. Laura's voice sounded behind them. She had arrived in the midst of the chaos. "Severe seizure," Daniel explained, still panting. "We managed to control it, but he's getting worse," Laura completed, her gaze meeting Emily's. A silent communication passed between them. This was no coincidence. "I'll order a full battery of tests," Laura announced. "Daniel, I need you to personally oversee them. Emily, keep a close eye on the patient. Any change, no matter how small, notify me immediately." As everyone moved to carry out their tasks, Emily couldn't help but feel they were in a race against time. Someone was determined to harm William Thompson, and they needed to find out who and why before it was too late. The day dragged on, tense and filled with apprehension. Emily divided her time between caring for William and discreetly observing Victoria, who seemed reluctant to leave the hospital. That night, exhausted but unable to relax, Emily finally arrived home. She found Ethan studying in the living room, surrounded by books and papers. "Hey, sis," he smiled, noticing her tiredness. "Tough day?" Emily nodded, letting herself fall onto the couch. "You have no idea." Ethan studied her for a moment before speaking. "You know, I was thinking about the exchange program. Maybe it's not the right time. There's so much going on and—" "No, Eth," Emily interrupted him, sitting up straight. "Don't even think about it. We'll figure it out, I promise. Your future is too important to give up on." As she hugged her brother, Emily felt a renewed determination. She didn't know how, but she would find a way to help Ethan achieve his dream, while also unraveling the mystery surrounding William Thompson. What Emily didn't know was that her actions hadn't gone unnoticed. In a luxurious office downtown, Victoria was speaking in a low voice with a shadowy figure. "She's becoming a problem," Victoria hissed. "We need to take care of this." "Don't worry," the deep voice replied. "I have a plan. Soon that nosy nurse won't be an obstacle anymore." Dawn brought with it a tense atmosphere at St. Mary's Hospital. Emily arrived earlier than usual, determined to uncover the mystery surrounding William Thompson before it was too late. As she entered the ICU, she was immediately approached by Dr. Laura, whose grave expression indicated something serious had happened. "Emily, we need to talk," Laura said, guiding her to an empty room. "The results of Mr. Thompson's latest tests came in. It's worse than we thought." Emily's heart raced. "What did they find?" Laura sighed heavily before answering. "We found traces of a rare toxin in his blood. It's something we wouldn't normally look for, but after what you told me, Emily, this confirms our suspicions. Someone is deliberately poisoning William Thompson." The revelation, though expected, hit Emily like a punch to the gut. "What do we do now? We have to call the police, right?" "It's not that simple," Laura replied, running her hand through her hair in frustration. "The Thompson family is extremely influential. If we make an accusation of this magnitude without concrete evidence, we could face serious consequences." "But we have the test results," Emily protested. "Which can easily be challenged by expensive lawyers," Laura countered. "We need something more solid, something that directly links the culprit to the poisoning." At that moment, they were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Daniel, the resident, looking agitated. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know," he said, stepping into the room. "Victoria Thompson is here with a group of lawyers. They're talking about transferring Mr. Thompson to a private clinic." Emily and Laura exchanged alarmed glances. If William were transferred, they would lose any chance of protecting him and uncovering the truth. "We can't allow this," Emily said, her voice filled with urgency. "He's not in any condition to be moved." Laura nodded. "I agree. I'll talk to them and try to buy more time. Emily, I need you to keep an eye on William. Don't let anyone near him without supervision." As Laura left to deal with Victoria and the lawyers, Emily returned to the ICU, her heart heavy with responsibility. As she approached William's bed, she noticed something unusual. The businessman, who had barely been able to open his eyes until now, seemed to be trying to say something. Emily leaned in, trying to make out the whispered words. "Safe," William murmured, his voice almost inaudible. "Office. Home." Before Emily could ask more, William's eyes closed again, exhausted from the effort. She stood there, puzzled, trying to decipher the meaning of those fragmented words. A safe in his office at home. What could be there that was so important? Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Victoria, accompanied by a man in a suit whom Emily recognized as the lawyer she had seen earlier. "Ah, nurse," Victoria said, her tone falsely sweet. "I hope you're taking good care of my stepfather. After all, these might be his last moments here at St. Mary's." Emily felt a chill run down her spine as she noticed the cold glint in Victoria's eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, with all due respect, I don't believe it's safe to transfer your stepfather at this time. His condition is very delicate." The lawyer stepped forward. "Don't worry, nurse. We have an elite medical team ready to take over Mr. Thompson's care. By the way, I heard you've been very dedicated to this case, perhaps even too much." The veiled threat in the lawyer's voice didn't go unnoticed. Emily felt her heart race, but maintained her composure. "I'm just doing my job, sir. The health and safety of my patients are my priority." Victoria smiled, but the gesture didn't reach her eyes. Of course. Well, soon this won't be your concern anymore. Oh, before I forget," she pulled an envelope from her bag. "A small token of appreciation for your services. Consider it an incentive to not worry so much about matters that don't concern you." Emily looked at the envelope, feeling a mix of anger and determination. She knew she was being tested, provoked into doing something impulsive. "Mrs. Thompson, I appreciate it, but I can't accept. As I said, I'm just doing my job." Victoria's smile faltered for a moment, replaced by an expression of irritation. Before she could respond, however, they were interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Laura. "Mrs. Thompson, gentlemen," Laura said, her voice firm. "I'm sorry, but I can't authorize Mr. Thompson's transfer at this time. His condition is critical, and any movement could be fatal." What followed was a heated discussion, with Victoria and the lawyer threatening to sue the hospital, while Laura stood firm in her medical decision. Emily watched, torn between the relief that William would remain under her care and the fear of the possible repercussions. When Victoria and her entourage finally left, momentarily defeated, Emily pulled Laura aside. "Doctor, something happened. Mr. Thompson, he spoke to me. He mentioned a safe in his home office." Laura's eyes widened. "This could be crucial, Emily, but how can we access that safe without raising suspicions?" At that moment, a risky idea began to form in Emily's mind. It was dangerous, possibly illegal, but it might be her only chance to unravel the entire plot. "Doctor," she said, her voice low and determined, "I think I know what we need to do, but it will require breaking a few rules." As Emily explained her plan, neither of them noticed the figure watching from a distance. Daniel, the resident, had overheard part of the conversation and now quietly walked away, his face a mask of concern. Or was it guilt? As night fell over New York, the players in this dangerous game of chess prepared to make their next moves. Emily knew she was about to cross a line from which there would be no turning back. But with William Thompson's life at stake and the truth within her grasp, she was willing to risk everything. Night had fallen over New York when Emily finally left the hospital, her heart heavy with the decision she had made. The plan she and Dr. Laura had devised was risky, bordering on illegal, but it seemed to be the only way to obtain the evidence needed to expose the scheme behind William Thompson's poisoning. As she drove home, Emily couldn't help but think about the potential consequences of her actions. She could lose her job, her nursing license, even face criminal charges. But the image of William Thompson, frail and fighting for his life, kept her determined. When she arrived home, she found Ethan hunched over books and papers at the kitchen table. "Hey, Em," he smiled, looking up. "Everything okay? You look worried." Emily forced a smile, not wanting to worry her brother. "Just tired, Eth. Tough day at the hospital." Ethan studied her for a moment before speaking. "You know you don't have to carry the world on your shoulders alone. If something's bothering you, you can tell me." For a brief moment, Emily considered sharing everything with her brother, but she quickly dismissed the idea. The less Ethan knew, the safer he would be. "Thanks, little bro," she said, hugging him. "I just need a good night's sleep, and you, how are the studies for the exchange program going?" Ethan's face lit up. "I'm giving it my all. You know, Em, I was thinking, maybe I can get a part-time job to help with the expenses." Emily's heart tightened. "Don't worry about that now, Ethan. Focus on your studies. We'll figure it out, I promise." After making sure Ethan was okay and focused on his studies, Emily retreated to her room. There, away from her brother's worried eyes, she finally allowed the tension of the past few days to take over. Silent tears streamed down her face as she contemplated what she was about to do. Her phone buzzed, bringing her back to reality. It was a message from Dr. Laura. "Everything's set for tomorrow night. Are you sure you want to do this?" Emily took a deep breath before replying, "Yes, we have no choice." The plan was bold. Taking advantage of a routine home medical visit to the Thompsons' mansion, Emily would try to access William's office and the safe he had mentioned. Dr. Laura would provide the necessary distraction, keeping Victoria occupied while Emily investigated. The next morning, Emily arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. She needed to make sure everything was in order before putting the plan into action. "Good morning, Emily." Daniel's voice surprised her. The resident seemed nervous, almost guilty. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Intrigued, Emily followed him to an empty room. Daniel closed the door before turning to her, his face a mask of concern. "Emily, I overheard your conversation with Dr. Laura yesterday," he confessed. "I know you're planning something dangerous." Emily's heart raced. Was Daniel an ally or a threat? "Daniel, No, let me finish," he interrupted. "I know something strange is going on with Mr. Thompson. And I think I can help." Emily studied him, trying to decipher his intentions. "How?" Daniel hesitated before continuing. Connections. People who can provide information about the Thompson family, things that aren't in the official records. The revelation caught Emily by surprise. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I also want to uncover the truth," Daniel replied, his voice heavy with emotion. "And because I care about you, Emily. I don't want you to risk this alone." The silence that followed was thick with tension and unspoken possibilities. Emily knew she needed to be cautious, but something in Daniel's sincerity touched her. "Okay," she finally said. "What do you know?" In the hours that followed, Emily and Daniel exchanged information, refining the plan for the night. With Daniel's connections, they now had a better idea of the layout of the Thompson mansion and the possible location of the safe. As the day progressed, the tension at St. Mary's Hospital was palpable. Victoria made another appearance, this time accompanied by a private doctor who insisted on William's transfer. Dr. Laura once again managed to delay the decision, but it was clear that time was running out. When night finally fell, Emily found herself in Dr. Laura's car, heading toward the Thompson mansion. Her heart raced as she mentally rehearsed every step of the plan. "Remember," Dr. Laura said, breaking the tense silence, "if anything goes wrong, abort the mission immediately. Your safety is the priority." Emily nodded, grateful for the doctor's concern. As the car approached the imposing gates of the mansion, she couldn't help but think of Ethan, his dream of studying abroad and everything that was at stake. What Emily didn't know was that, at that very moment, other forces were in motion. In a luxurious office in the heart of the city, Victoria was arguing heatedly on the phone. "I don't care how, fix this," she hissed. "If that nosy nurse finds out anything, the whole plan will fall apart. And you know what happens if we fail, don't you?" On the other end of the line, a deep voice responded, "Don't worry, Miss Thompson. We'll take the necessary steps. By the end of tonight, your problem will be resolved permanently." The Thompson mansion loomed before Emily, its illuminated windows contrasting with the darkness of the New York night. As she and Dr. Laura approached the main entrance, Emily felt her heart quicken. There was no turning back now. "Remember," Dr. Laura whispered, "stay calm and act natural. You're here just for a routine visit." Emily nodded, adjusting the bag where she had hidden a small recording device courtesy of Daniel's connections. The door opened, revealing a stern-faced housekeeper. "Good evening," Dr. Laura said, her voice professional and controlled. "We're here for the scheduled home visit." The housekeeper led them inside, through hallways adorned with priceless artwork and antique furniture. Emily couldn't help but notice security cameras strategically placed throughout. Victoria was waiting for them in the living room, her face a mask of feigned concern. "Ah, Dr. Laura, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so worried about my stepfather." "I understand your concern, Mrs. Thompson," replied Laura, subtly positioning herself between Victoria and Emily. "We'd like to conduct a full assessment of Mr. Thompson's home environment. Nurse Emily will inspect the bedroom and adjacent areas while we discuss the next steps in his treatment." Victoria hesitated for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly, as she watched Emily. Of course, Sophia," she called to the housekeeper. "Please show the nurse the way to my stepfather's room." As she followed Sophia through the mansion's hallways, Emily tried to memorize every detail, every turn. According to Daniel's information, William's office should be near the master bedroom. "Here's Mr. Thompson's room," said Sophia, opening an ornate door. "Do you need anything else?" "No, thank you," replied Emily, forcing a smile. "I'll do the assessment and be back shortly." As soon as Sophia walked away, Emily began her search. The room was spacious and luxurious, but there was no sign of the office or the safe William had mentioned. She knew her time was limited. Carefully, she left the room and began exploring the hallway. Her breath caught in her throat when she noticed a door partially hidden by an elaborate tapestry. With her heart racing, she turned the knob. William Thompson's office was exactly as she had imagined, imposing, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive mahogany desk in the center. But where was the safe? Emily scoured the room, aware that every second put her at greater risk. That's when she noticed something odd about one of the wooden panels on the wall. When she pressed it lightly, the panel shifted, revealing a digital safe. "Bingo," Emily murmured, her heart pounding. but how to open it, she didn't have the combination. Frustrated, Emily looked around, searching for a clue. Her eyes landed on a photo on the desk. William embracing a smiling woman, likely his late wife. On the frame, a date, 07/15/1985. With trembling hands, Emily entered the sequence into the safe, 07151-985. To her surprise and relief, the safe opened with a soft click. Inside, there were a series of documents, contracts, and a flash drive. Quickly, Emily began photographing everything with her phone, knowing she wouldn't have time to analyze it there. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching. She only realized she wasn't alone when a cold voice cut through the silence. Well, what do we have here?" Emily turned, freezing, as she saw Victoria standing in the doorway, a cruel smile on her lips. "Looks like we have a very curious nurse," Victoria continued, slowly advancing. "You know, I always knew you were trouble, but this is much worse than I imagined." Emily stepped back, her mind racing for an escape. "Mrs. Thompson, I can explain." "Oh, don't worry," Victoria interrupted, her tone falsely sweet. "You'll have plenty of time to explain. To the police, perhaps." At that moment, the sound of breaking glass and screams from the floor below caught both of them by surprise. Taking advantage of Victoria's momentary distraction, Emily acted on instinct. She grabbed the flash drive from the safe and ran toward the door. Victoria tried to stop her, but Emily was faster. She dodged and sprinted down the hallway, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might explode. "Stop her!" Victoria's shout echoed through the mansion. Emily took the stairs 2 at a time, nearly tripping in her haste. When she reached the entrance hall, she was met with a chaotic scene. Masked men had invaded the mansion, and a confrontation was underway. Dr. Laura was cornered in a corner, looking frightened but unharmed. Amid the chaos, Emily saw her chance. She ran toward Laura, grabbed her arm, and pulled her toward the exit. "Come on, we have to get out of here," Emily shouted. The two women ran out of the mansion, the sound of gunshots and screams echoing behind them. They got into Laura's car, which screeched away with tires squealing. As they sped away, Emily looked back, watching the Thompson mansion shrink in the distance. Her body trembled with adrenaline and fear. "What happened back there?" Laura asked, her voice shaking. Emily, still breathless, clutched the flash drive tightly. I think we just got ourselves into something much bigger than we imagined." What Emily didn't know was that the events of that night had set off a chain reaction that would go far beyond the case of William Thompson. Powerful forces had been disturbed, and now she was at the center of a storm that threatened to swallow not only her but everyone around her. Dr. Laura's car weaved through the streets of New York, the city lights reflecting on the windshield like shooting stars. Emily, still panting, kept glancing in the rearview mirror, fearing they were being followed. "Where are we going?" Laura asked, her voice tense. Emily hesitated. They couldn't go to the hospital. It would be the first place they'd look. Her home was also out of the question. She couldn't risk involving Ethan in this. "I know a place," she finally said. "Turn right at the next intersection." 15 minutes later, they parked in front of an old building in a quiet residential neighborhood. Emily led Laura up to the 3rd floor, stopping in front of a worn-out door. "What is this place?" Laura asked, looking around nervously. "A friend's apartment," Emily replied, knocking on the door in a specific pattern. "He's out of town, but he gave me a key for emergencies." The door opened, revealing a familiar face, Daniel. "Emily, Dr. Laura." "What's going on?" he asked, surprised and worried. "Long story," said Emily, pushing them inside and locking the door. "But first we need to check this out." She pulled the flash drive from her pocket, looking at it as if it were a bomb about to explode. Daniel quickly set up his laptop, and the 3 of them gathered around the screen as Emily inserted the flash drive. A series of folders appeared, each labeled with dates and cryptic names. "My God," whispered Laura as they opened the files. "This is evidence of large-scale money laundering," Daniel finished, his eyes wide. "And not just that. There are records of bribes, fraudulent contracts, even plans for murders." Emily felt her stomach churn. William Thompson wasn't just a businessman. He was at the center of a massive criminal network, and Victoria was trying to take control, added Laura. That's why the poisoning. She wanted William out of the way to take over the operation. A heavy silence fell over the trio as the magnitude of the situation became clear. They had stumbled upon something much bigger and more dangerous than they could have imagined. "What do we do now?" asked Daniel, breaking the silence. Emily took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. "We need to protect this information, and we need help. Someone we can trust in the police or the district attorney's office." "I can help with that," said Daniel, surprising the two women. "Dosa, remember when I said I had connections? Well, my uncle is a federal police commissioner. He's been investigating corruption cases for years. If there's anyone who can help us, it's him." Emily nodded, feeling a spark of hope. "Great. Get in touch with him, but be discreet. We don't know who else might be involved in this." As Daniel made the call, Emily stepped away to a corner of the apartment, finally allowing herself a moment to process everything that had happened. Her phone buzzed, showing several missed messages and calls from Ethan. With a heavy heart, she realized she needed to protect her brother at all costs. Quickly, she typed a message. "Ethan, there's been an emergency at the hospital. I'll be staying here overnight. Don't worry, everything's fine. Love you." The lie left a bitter taste in her mouth, but it was necessary. The less Ethan knew, the safer he would be. "Emily," Laura's voice brought her back to reality. "We have another problem. The hospital is calling. Victoria has filed a motion to transfer William immediately to a private clinic." "We can't let that happen," said Emily, alarmed. "If he leaves our supervision—" "I know," interrupted Laura, "but legally we can't stop him. Unless we prove that Victoria is a threat to him," Emily finished, an idea forming in her mind. "Dr. Laura, those tests that showed traces of poison, do we still have access to them?" Laura nodded. "They're on my computer at the hospital. Why?" "If we can present those results to a judge, along with some of the evidence we've found, we could get a protective order for William," concluded Laura, her eyes shining with understanding. At that moment, Daniel returned, looking agitated. "My uncle is on his way. He told us not to leave here and not to trust anyone." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. While waiting for Daniel's uncle, they organized the evidence, prepared statements, and mapped out a plan of action. It was almost dawn when a firm knock sounded at the door. Daniel opened it, revealing a middle-aged man with a serious expression. "Detective Michael Carter," he introduced himself, quickly entering and closing the door behind him. Daniel told me the basics, but I need to hear everything from the beginning. Emily took a deep breath and began to tell the whole story, from her initial suspicions to the dramatic events of the previous night. As she spoke, she could see the detective's expression grow increasingly grave. "Do you have any idea of the hornet's nest you've stirred up?" he asked when Emily finished. "The Thompson family has connections at every level of government. This goes far beyond a simple poisoning case." "What can we do?" asked Emily, feeling the weight of the situation. Michael stood up, pacing the room thoughtfully. "First, we need to ensure your safety. Then, we'll set up an operation to expose this entire criminal network. But I warn you, this won't be easy and you'll be in constant danger." Emily exchanged glances with Laura and Daniel. They had come too far to back down now. "We're ready," she said, her voice firm. "What do we need to do?" As the sun rose over New York, casting a golden light over the apartment, Emily felt a mix of fear and determination. She knew the next few days would be the most challenging of her life, but she also knew she was doing the right thing. The days that followed were an emotional roller coaster and a frenzy of activity for Emily and her allies. Detective Michael Carter had set up a covert operation, working tirelessly to build a solid case against the criminal network led by the Thompson family. Emily, Laura, and Daniel were temporarily housed in a safe house on the outskirts of New York. The separation from their normal lives was difficult, especially for Emily, who struggled with not being able to see or properly talk to Ethan. The key, short and vague messages she sent to her brother felt increasingly inadequate. On a particularly tense afternoon, as they reviewed the evidence for the 1,000th time, Emily received a call that made her heart freeze. "Em, what's going on?" Ethan's voice sounded worried and a little hurt. "It's been days since you barely talked to me. The hospital staff says you're on leave. Something's wrong, isn't it?" Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the lie. "Ethan, I can't explain everything right now, but I need you to trust me, okay? I'm fine. Just dealing with a complicated situation at work." "But Emily, Please, Ethan," she interrupted, her voice slightly breaking. "I promise I'll explain everything as soon as I can. Just stay safe, okay? Don't talk about me to anyone, and if something strange happens, call this number." She handed him the emergency contact that Detective Michael had provided. After hanging up, Emily allowed herself a moment of weakness, letting the tears flow freely. Daniel, who was nearby, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's going to be okay," he said softly. "We're doing the right thing." Emily nodded, wiping away the tears. "I know, but sometimes the price feels too high." Meanwhile, at St. Mary's Hospital, William Thompson's condition remained delicate. Thanks to the evidence presented by Dr. Laura, a judge had issued a temporary order preventing the businessman's transfer. Victoria, furious, intensified her efforts to remove her stepfather from the hospital's care. At the safe house, Detective Michael arrived with troubling news. "We have a problem," he announced, his expression grave. "Someone leaked information about our investigation. The Thompson family network is on the move, destroying evidence and silencing witnesses." "My God," whispered Laura. "What can we do?" "We need to act fast," Michael replied. "I'll request search and seizure warrants for the main suspects, but we need more. Something that directly links Victoria to William's poisoning." It was then that Emily had an idea. "The tea!" she exclaimed. "Remember how Victoria always brought a special tea for William? If we could prove she was using it to poison him." "But how?" asked Daniel. "We don't have access to the tea now." Emily bit, her lip thoughtful. "Maybe we don't need the tea itself. What if we could get Victoria to confess?" The plan that followed was risky and depended on many variables, but it was their best chance. Emily, with Michael's help, would turn herself in to Victoria, pretending to negotiate her silence in exchange for money. The goal was to get Victoria to incriminate herself while the conversation was secretly recorded. On the night of the planned meeting, Emily felt her heart racing as she approached the agreed-upon location, a luxurious restaurant in downtown New York. She wore a hidden listening device, and Detective Michael's teams were strategically positioned around the area. Victoria was already there, as elegant as ever, but with a dangerous glint in her eyes. "Nurse," she greeted coldly. "I must say, I was surprised by your contact. I thought you were indisposed." Emily forced a nervous smile. "Circumstances change, Mrs. Thompson. I realize that perhaps we can reach an agreement that benefits us both." The two women stared at each other for a long moment, like predators assessing their prey. The tension was palpable. "And what kind of agreement are you proposing?" Victoria finally asked, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Emily took a deep breath, knowing she was about to step into the lion's den. "The kind that guarantees my silence and your freedom." As the conversation unfolded, Emily carefully maneuvered, trying to get Victoria to reveal incriminating details. It was a dangerous game of cat and mouse, where every word could mean the difference between success and disaster. What Emily didn't know was that, on the other side of the city, unexpected events were unfolding. Ethan, worried about his sister's strange behavior, had decided to investigate on his own. His search led him to alarming discoveries, and unwittingly he was about to become a crucial pawn in this deadly game. As the night progressed, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, but the price of the truth was about to become terrifyingly high. Emily was walking a fine line, and a single misstep could cost not only her life but also the lives of everyone she loved. The luxurious restaurant buzzed with muffled conversations and the clinking of expensive cutlery, but for Emily, the world had narrowed down to the table where she sat with Victoria Thompson. Every word, every gesture was a dangerous dance on the edge of an abyss. "So, nurse," Victoria said, lazily swirling her wineglass, "you say you have information that could compromise me. I'm curious to know exactly what you think you know." Emily swallowed hard, aware of the hidden microphone in her clothing. She needed to make Victoria talk without revealing too much. "Let's just say I have evidence about certain activities of yours, activities related to your stepfather's health." A flash of something, anger, fear, crossed Victoria's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a cold smile. "Go on, please." "The tea," Emily said, leaning forward. "I know what was in it, and I know why you were so insistent on giving it to him." Victoria froze for a moment, then let out a laugh that sent chills down Emily's spine. "Oh, darling, you really think you know something? You have no idea what game you're playing." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Ethan was in his own kind of danger. After days of frantic research and conversations with contacts at the hospital, he had come to alarming conclusions about his sister's involvement in something much larger and more dangerous than he could have imagined. Determined to find answers, Ethan had headed to Daniel's apartment, the last place he knew Emily had been. What he didn't expect was to find the place ransacked, with clear signs of a struggle. "My God, Em, what have you gotten yourself into?" he murmured, his heart racing with fear. It was then that he noticed something, a small flash drive fallen behind a piece of furniture. With trembling hands, Ethan picked it up, instinctively knowing that it could be the key to the entire mystery. Back at the restaurant, the conversation between Emily and Victoria was reaching a critical point. "Let's be direct," Victoria said, her tone now sharp as a blade. "What do you want to keep your mouth shut?" Emily took a deep breath. It was now or never. "I want to know why. Why poison your own stepfather? What do you gain from it?" For a moment, Emily feared she had gone too far. Victoria's face twisted into a mask of rage, but then surprisingly she began to laugh. "Oh, you naive fool," Victoria hissed. "You think this is about inheritance, about a simple business succession. William Thompson's empire goes far beyond what you can imagine. Government contracts, international money laundering, political influence. He built a web of power and corruption that spans continents. And me? I am the rightful heir to all of it." Emily felt her blood run cold. The magnitude of what they were facing was even greater than they had imagined. "But why poison him slowly?" she pressed, needing more details. "Why not just kill him outright?" Victoria finished, a cruel smile on her lips. "Because the sudden death of William Thompson would raise too many suspicions. But a powerful man, slowly consumed by a mysterious illness, that generates sympathy, not investigation. Besides," she leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with malice, "I wanted him to suffer, to feel his empire slipping through his fingers, powerless, to do anything about it." At that moment, Emily knew they had succeeded. The confession was recorded. But before she could react, the sound of breaking glass and shouts filled the restaurant. "Federal police! Nobody move!" Chaos erupted. Emily saw Victoria's face twist in shock and fury as she realized she had fallen into a trap. But before the agents could reach her, Victoria grabbed something from her bag, a gun. "You'll regret this," she hissed at Emily, aiming the weapon. Time seemed to slow. Emily saw Victoria's finger on the trigger, heard the agent's shouts, felt her own heart pounding deafeningly in her ears, and then a blur of motion. Someone diving in front of her. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the restaurant. Emily opened her eyes, which she hadn't even realized she had closed, and her heart nearly stopped. Lying in front of her, with a red stain rapidly spreading across his shirt, was Daniel. "No!" she screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. "Daniel, please, hold on!" As the agents subdued Victoria and chaos continued around them, Emily desperately pressed on Daniel's wound, tears streaming down her face. "Why?" she sobbed. "Why did you do this?" Daniel smiled weakly, his trembling hand touching her face. "Because I love you, you silly." And then his eyes closed. Emily's world seemed to be crumbling. She barely registered when the paramedics arrived when they tried to pull her away from Daniel. All she could think about was how things had gone so terribly wrong. But fate had one more card to play. Amid the chaos, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. With trembling hands, she answered. Emily Silver. A deep, menacing voice sounded from the other end. We have your brother. If you want to see him, alive again, come alone to the address we'll send you, and bring the flash drive. The phone fell from her hand. Just when Emily thought things couldn't get worse, the universe proved her wrong. The night of victory had turned into a nightmare, and now she was faced with an impossible choice. The world around Emily seemed to move in slow motion. The flashing lights of the police cars, the paramedics rushing Daniel on a stretcher, the buzz of voices around her. It all felt distant, as if she were watching through a foggy glass. Miss Silver. The voice of Detective Michael brought her back to reality. We need to take you to a safe location. The situation is still volatile. And no, Emily interrupted him, her voice surprisingly steady. They've taken my brother. Michael paled. What do you mean, who? Quickly, Emily explained the call she had received. The detective cursed under his breath, running a hand through his graying hair. This complicates things, he murmured. Emily, you can't go alone. It's obviously a trap. I know, she replied, her eyes filling with tears of frustration. But it's Ethan. I can't abandon him. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with the implications of what was to come. Finally, Michael spoke. We have to be smart about this. I'll assemble a tactical team, but we'll need you to cooperate with us. Every step has to be calculated. Emily nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. As Michael walked away to make the necessary arrangements, she found herself alone with her thoughts for a moment. Her mind wandered to Daniel, now fighting for his life in some operating room. The sound of the gunshot, the feeling of his blood on her hands, the confession of love in his eyes, it all haunted her. And now Ethan was in danger because of her. How did things come to this? She murmured to herself. Minutes later, which felt like hours, Michael returned with a plan. Emily would be equipped with a tracking device and a hidden microphone. An elite team would follow them from a distance, ready to intervene at the slightest sign of danger. Remember, Michael instructed, as they prepared, our priority is Ethan's safety. Don't try to be a hero. At the first sign that things are getting out of control, we'll move in. Emily nodded, feeling the weight of the situation on her shoulders. As they headed to the location indicated by the kidnappers, she couldn't help but think of all the lives that had been affected by this plot. William Thompson, still unconscious in the hospital. Victoria, now in custody, but certainly not the end of the criminal network. Daniel, whose life hung by a thread because of his act of bravery. And now Ethan, innocent in all this, dragged into danger because of his association with her. The car stopped in front of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Emily's heart raced as she prepared to get out. We're with you, Michael assured her, squeezing her shoulder in a gesture of support. Good luck. With trembling steps, Emily approached the entrance of the warehouse. The door creaked ominously as it opened, revealing a large, dimly lit space. In the center, tied to a chair, was Ethan. Em, he shouted as he saw her, his eyes wide with fear and relief. Ethan! Emily took a step forward, but was stopped by a deep voice from the shadows. Not so fast, Miss Silver. A man emerged from the darkness, his face hidden by a mask. First, the flash drive. Emily hesitated, her hand instinctively going to the pocket where she kept the device. How do I know you'll let my brother go? The man laughed, a cold and humorless sound. You're in no position to negotiate. The flash drive now, or your little brother here pays the price. Ethan squirmed in the chair, trying to speak through the gag. His eyes pleaded with Emily not to give in, to save herself. At that moment, facing the culmination of the entire plot they had uncovered, Emily found herself faced with an impossible choice. Handing over the flash drive meant potentially letting crucial evidence against the criminal network slip away. Refusing could cost Ethan his life. With a heavy heart, she stepped forward, extending her hand with the flash drive. Here it is. Now let my brother go. The man took the flash drive, examining it briefly, before nodding to one of his accomplices. Ethan was untied, but before he could run to Emily, the leader of the kidnappers drew a gun. I'm sorry, Miss Silver, but we can't leave any witnesses. Time seemed to freeze. Emily saw the man's finger tighten on the trigger, heard Ethan's muffled scream, felt her own body move on pure instinct, And then chaos erupted. The windows of the warehouse shattered as the tactical team stormed the place. Shots rang out. Screams filled the air, and Emily found herself thrown to the ground, shielding Ethan with her own body. Seconds or minutes passed, she couldn't tell, until finally the dust settled. When Emily dared to lift her head, she saw the kidnappers being handcuffed, Detective Michael running toward her. "Are you both okay?" he asked, helping them to their feet. Emily nodded, trembling as she hugged Ethan tightly. "Yes, we're alive." As they were escorted out of the warehouse to the safety of the waiting patrol cars, Emily felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Relief, fear, exhaustion, all mixed together in an overwhelming whirlwind. But amidst the chaos, one certainty solidified in her heart. This wasn't over yet. The criminal network was vast and powerful, and they had only scratched the surface. As the sun began to rise on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Emily knew a new battle was just beginning. A battle for truth, for justice, and above all for the safety of those she loved. The days following Ethan's rescue were a whirlwind of emotions and frantic activity. Emily and her brother were placed under police protection, housed in a safe house while the investigation continued. The siblings' reunion was marked by tears, tight hugs, and whispered promises to never keep secrets from each other again. Ethan said one night as they sat on the small porch of the safe house, gazing at the starry sky. "Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped." Emily sighed, wrapping her arm around her brother's shoulders. "I wanted to protect you, Ethan. But I realized that sometimes trying to protect the people we love by keeping them in the dark can end up putting them in more danger." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "You know, when I started investigating on my own, I had no idea how big this was. But now, what I found on the flash drive..." Emily straightened, alert. "What do you mean? What flash drive?" Ethan then told her about his visit to Daniel's apartment, the device he had found hidden there, and the shocking information he had uncovered before being captured. "My God," Emily murmured, her mind racing. "Ethan, this could be the key to dismantling the entire operation. We need to tell Detective Michael right away." The next morning, Michael arrived at the safe house, his face a mix of exhaustion and determination. When Ethan shared his findings, the detective's eyes widened. "This changes everything," he said, typing furiously on his phone. "I'll call an emergency meeting with the team. Emily, Ethan, you need to come with us. Your insights will be crucial." Hours later, in a heavily guarded conference room at the Federal Police Headquarters, Emily found herself facing a group of investigators, prosecutors, and even a federal judge. The atmosphere was tense, charged with the weight of the revelations about to be made. As Ethan presented the information he had discovered, Emily couldn't help but think of Daniel. The latest update from St. Mary's Hospital indicated that he had survived surgery but was still in critical condition. Her heart ached as she remembered his confession of love in the moments before he lost consciousness. "This goes far beyond what we imagined," the lead prosecutor's voice cut through Emily's thoughts. "We're talking about a corruption network that reaches high levels of government, multinational corporations, even international connections. And Victoria Thompson is just the tip of the iceberg," Michael added. "We have reason to believe there are even more powerful figures behind this entire operation." The federal judge, a middle-aged man with piercing eyes, leaned forward. "I understand the gravity of the situation, but we must proceed with extreme caution. The political and economic ramifications of this investigation could be catastrophic if not handled correctly." Emily felt a wave of frustration. "With all due respect, Your Honor, while we discuss caution and ramifications, lives are at risk. William Thompson is still in the hospital, vulnerable, and how many other people might be harmed by this criminal network as we speak?" A heavy silence fell over the room. The judge studied Emily for a long moment before speaking. "Miss Silver, your courage and determination are admirable. And you are right, we cannot afford to hesitate, but we also cannot act impulsively. We need a plan that will allow us to dismantle this network once and for all, without giving them the chance to escape or destroy evidence." The next few hours were dedicated to crafting a meticulous strategy. Teams would be assigned to protect, Key witnesses, including William Thompson. Search and seizure warrants would be prepared to be executed simultaneously at various locations, and, most importantly, an intelligence operation would be set up to identify and monitor the main players behind the criminal network. As the meeting drew to a close, Emily felt a mix of hope and apprehension. They were about to unleash something monumental, something that could change the course of the country's history. "Emily," Michael called her as everyone began to disperse. "There's one more thing we need to discuss about your future." She looked at him, intrigued. "What do you mean?" The detective smiled, a rare gesture that lit up his tired face. "Your role in unraveling this plot was crucial. Your intuition, your courage, these are qualities we cannot waste. I've spoken to some contacts, and if you're interested, there's a spot at the Federal Police Academy with your name on it." Emily was speechless. It was an opportunity she had never considered, but one that suddenly felt so right, so aligned with everything she had fought for in the past few weeks. Before she could respond, however, her phone buzzed. It was a message from the hospital. "Daniel woke up," she read aloud, her heart racing. "He's asking for me." Michael nodded understandingly. "Go. We'll be in touch about the next steps." As Emily hurried to the hospital, her mind spun with the possibilities opening up before her. A new career, the chance to make a difference on an even larger scale, the prospect of a relationship with Daniel. But at the same time, she knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The criminal network they were about to confront was powerful and would not hesitate to use every means possible to protect itself. As she entered the hospital room where Daniel was waiting, Emily felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Joy at seeing him awake, gratitude for his sacrifice, and a renewed determination to see this fight through to the end. The hospital room was quiet, except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. Emily entered hesitantly, her heart racing as she saw Daniel lying in bed, pale but conscious. "Hey," he said with a weak smile as he saw her. "Hey yourself," Emily replied, stepping closer and taking his hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," Daniel joked. Then his face turned serious. "Emily, Shh," she interrupted him gently. "You don't need to say anything. You saved my life, Daniel. I can never thank you enough." His eyes filled with emotion. "I'd do it again without hesitation. Emily, what I said before about loving you, I meant it." Emily felt her heart skip a beat. She opened her mouth to respond but was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Dr. Silver, the physician in charge of William Thompson's case. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his expression serious. "Emily, we need to talk. It's about Mr. Thompson." With one last squeeze of Daniel's hand and a promise to return soon, Emily followed Dr. Silver into the hallway. "What happened?" she asked, dreading the answer. "William Thompson woke up," the doctor explained, "but he's different, confused, and he's asking to speak with you specifically." Intrigued and apprehensive, Emily followed the doctor to William's room. The once imposing businessman now seemed frail and diminished in the hospital bed. "Miss Silver," William murmured upon seeing her, his voice hoarse. "Finally, we need to talk." Emily approached cautiously. "Mr. Thompson, how are you feeling?" "Like a fool," he replied, a bitter smile on his lips, "an old regretful fool. Miss Silver, I know what Victoria did, and I know you risked everything to save me and expose the truth." Emily was speechless, surprised by the man's clarity and apparent remorse. William continued, "I built an empire, Miss Silver, but in the process I lost my soul. Now I want to make things right before it's too late." He then revealed to Emily the existence of a secret safe at his country house containing documents that would incriminate not only Victoria, but dozens of powerful figures involved in the corruption network. "Use this information wisely," William pleaded. "Don't make the same mistakes I did." Emily left the room with her head spinning. She immediately contacted Detective Michael, sharing the new information. An operation was quickly set up to retrieve the documents from the secret safe. In the weeks that followed, the case exploded in the media. Dubbed Operation Phoenix, it resulted in dozens of high-profile arrests, including politicians, business leaders, and even corrupt judges. New York society was in shock at the scale of the scheme exposed. Emily found herself at the center of a media storm. Journalists chased her for interviews, her face graced magazine covers, and she even received invitations to appear on TV shows. Amid all the chaos, she found comfort in quiet moments with Daniel, who was recovering well, and with Ethan, who supported her unconditionally. One afternoon, while visiting Daniel at the hospital, Emily finally addressed the elephant in the room. "About what you said before you were shot," she began nervously. I love you too, Daniel. I think I've loved you for a long time. I was just afraid to admit it." The kiss that followed was sweet, filled with promise and future possibilities. But not everything was rosy. Despite the success of the operation, Emily knew there was still a lot of work to be done. The criminal network was vast, with international branches, and some of the big players were still at large. On top of that, she faced a crucial decision: accept the offer to join the federal police or follow her original dream of becoming a doctor. One evening, while discussing her options with Ethan and Daniel, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Miss Silver," a deep, unfamiliar voice sounded on the other end. "Congratulations on your role in Operation Phoenix. Truly impressive, but I fear you've only scratched the surface." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. "Who is this?" "Let's just say I'm someone who admires your work and wants to help," the voice replied. "If you want to dig deeper, uncover the true extent of this web of corruption, meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m. in Central Park. Come alone." The call ended abruptly, leaving Emily stunned. Daniel and Ethan, noticing her expression, asked what had happened. Emily hesitated for a moment before sharing the contents of the mysterious call. "You can't go alone," Daniel protested immediately. "It's too dangerous." "But this could be our chance to unravel everything once and for all," Emily argued. Ethan, who had matured considerably since the start of this journey, suggested, "What if we inform Detective Michael? He could set up a discreet surveillance operation." After much discussion, it was decided that Emily would go to the meeting, but with the covert support of the federal police. What she didn't know was that this decision would put her on a collision course with forces darker and more powerful than she could imagine. As the night wore on, Emily found herself gazing out the window, contemplating the starry sky of New York. Tomorrow could be the day that changed everything once again. With a mix of apprehension and determination, she prepared to face whatever fate had in store for her. Central Park was quiet that Thursday afternoon, with only a few joggers and families enjoying the sunny day. Emily walked slowly along the main path, her eyes alert to every movement around her. She knew Detective Michael's team was strategically positioned throughout the park, but that didn't ease the tension she felt. At exactly 3 p.m., Emily arrived at the agreed meeting point, a lonely bench near the lake. To her surprise, someone was already sitting there. An elderly woman with grey hair and sunglasses feeding the ducks with pieces of bread. Hesitant, Emily approached and sat down beside the woman. "Beautiful afternoon, isn't it?" the elderly woman commented casually, without taking her eyes off the ducks. "Yes, very pleasant," Emily replied, unsure if this was the person she was supposed to meet. The woman smiled, still not looking directly at Emily. "You must be wondering if I'm the one you came to meet. The answer is yes and no." Before Emily could question this enigmatic statement, the elderly woman continued, "My name is Margaret Stevens. 30 years ago, I was in your position, a young idealist who believed I could change the system from within." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. You were a police officer," Margaret chuckled softly. "A prosecutor, actually. And like you, I uncovered a web of corruption that went far beyond what I could have imagined. But unlike you, I made the mistake of trusting the wrong people." The elderly woman finally turned to face Emily, removing her sunglasses. Her eyes were a piercing blue, filled with years of experience and, Emily noticed, a deep sadness. "What happened?" Emily asked, her curiosity momentarily overriding her caution. "I was silenced," Margaret replied simply. "Not with violence, but with bureaucracy, veiled threats, and eventually forced exile. I've spent the last 3 decades watching from afar, gathering information, waiting for the right moment to act. Margaret then opened her bag, pulling out a small electronic device. This contains decades of evidence, names, dates, transactions. It's the key to dismantling not just the network you've exposed, but the entire corrupt system that supports it. Emily looked at the device with a mix of fascination and fear. Why are you giving this to me? Why now? Because you've proven to be different, Emily, Margaret answered, her voice heavy with emotion. You've faced threats, bribery attempts, even violence, and yet you haven't given up. You're the right person to take this forward. Emily took the device with trembling hands. What exactly is on this? The truth, Margaret said simply. About politicians who sell themselves to the highest bidder, business people who profit from others' suffering, judges who twist the law for their own benefit, but also about good people who were silenced, assassinated, who mysteriously disappeared, lives destroyed in the name of power and greed. And the gravity of the situation hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. She knew that by accepting that device, she was committing to something far greater and more dangerous than anything she had ever faced. Margaret, Emily began, her voice trembling slightly. Why don't you use this information yourself? The elderly woman smiled sadly. My time has passed, dear. Besides, they know me. They'd be prepared. But you're the wild card they don't expect. At that moment, Emily's phone vibrated. It was a message from Daniel. Are you okay? The team is getting restless. Emily took a deep breath, looking back at Margaret. What should I do now? Be cautious, Margaret warned. Only trust those you're absolutely sure of, and remember, once you start unraveling this, there's no turning back. Are you prepared for the consequences? Emily thought about everything she had been through up to that point, about Ethan, about Daniel, about the lives that had been affected by the corruption she had already exposed. She thought of the oath she had made to herself to make a difference in the world. I am, she replied firmly. Margaret nodded, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. Then go. And may God protect you, Emily Silver. The future of our country may well be in your hands. With those words, Margaret stood up and walked slowly away, leaving Emily alone with the weight of the world on her shoulders. As she watched the elderly woman walk away, Emily felt a mix of emotions, fear, determination, and a strange sense of destiny. She knew that from that moment on, her life would never be the same. With her heart racing, she sent a message to Daniel. I'm fine. Meet you in 10 minutes at the extraction point. Carefully storing the device, Emily stood up from the bench. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky in golden and pink hues. It was the end of one day, but the beginning of a new journey. As she walked to meet her team, Emily couldn't help but think about the ramifications of what she was about to unleash. She was about to shake the foundations of power in New York, and she knew the battle that would follow would be the hardest of her life. The days following the meeting in the park were a whirlwind of frantic activity and crucial decisions for Emily. The device Margaret had given her was a true Pandora's box, filled with explosive information that threatened to shake the structures of power in New York. Emily, Daniel, now recovered enough to leave the hospital. Ethan and Detective Michael spent endless hours analyzing the data, drawing connections and devising strategies. The scope of the corruption was even vaster and more intricate than they had initially imagined. This goes far beyond a common corruption scheme, Michael murmured one night, running his hand through his graying hair. We're talking about a systematic structure that has infiltrated every level of government and the private sector. Emily nodded gravely. And that's why we need to be extremely careful about who we share this information with. We don't know how far this network of influence goes. The decision on how to proceed wasn't easy. Exposing everything at once could cause institutional chaos in the country. On the other hand, moving too slowly would give the corrupt the chance to destroy evidence and silence witnesses. After much deliberation, the group decided on a strategic approach. They would start by exposing smaller cases, building credibility and public support before going after the bigger targets. The first case they decided to tackle involved a scheme of overbilling in public works contracts. It was significant enough to draw attention, but not explosive enough to alert the big players. Emily, using her media contacts established during Operation Phoenix, leaked carefully selected information to trusted journalists. The reaction was immediate and intense. The headlines splashed across the newspapers. New corruption scandal shakes the country. Connections between politicians and contractors exposed. Public demands full investigation. As public opinion boiled over, Emily and her team worked tirelessly behind the scenes, laying the groundwork for the bigger revelations yet to come. However, not everything went smoothly. Emily began to notice subtle signs that they were being watched. Suspicious cars parked near her house, strange phone calls, the constant feeling of being followed. One night, as she was returning home after a late meeting with the team, Emily was approached by a mysterious man in a dark alley. "Miss Silver," he said, his voice deep and threatening. "Consider this a friendly warning. There are forces at play here that you don't understand. Back off now while you still can." Before Emily could react, the man disappeared into the shadows, leaving her trembling with fear and adrenaline. This incident only served to strengthen her resolve. The next morning, she called an emergency meeting with her team. "They're getting nervous," she explained, recounting the encounter from the previous night, which means we're on the right track. But it also means the danger is increasing. We need to speed up our timeline. Daniel, who had become not only a crucial ally, but also an emotional pillar for Emily, expressed his concern. Maybe we should consider additional protection for you and Ethan." Emily shook her head. "We can't afford to draw more attention. Besides, the more people we involve, the higher the risk of leaks." Officer Michael, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up. "I have a suggestion. There's a special unit in the federal police, highly trained and absolutely reliable. They could provide discreet security without compromising the operation." After some discussion, the group agreed to Michael's proposal. Security was subtly reinforced, allowing Emily and her team to continue their work with a bit more peace of mind. The following weeks were an emotional roller coaster. More cases were exposed, each one bigger and more impactful than the last. American society was in turmoil, with protests in the streets demanding justice and transparency. Politicians began to fall like dominoes. Once untouchable businessmen were led away in handcuffs before the cameras. The judicial system, pressured by public opinion, seemed finally willing to act with the necessary rigor. But as they got closer to the core of corruption, the risks grew exponentially. Emily knew they were about to face the most dangerous and powerful adversaries yet. One night, while working late analyzing documents, Emily received a call that chilled her blood. "Emily Silver," a distorted voice sounded from the other end. "You were warned to back off. Now, you'll pay the price for your stubbornness." Before she could respond, the call ended. Seconds later, her phone buzzed with a message. It was a photo of Ethan leaving college, clearly taken without his knowledge, accompanied by a simple text. "He's next." Panic gripped Emily. She immediately called Daniel and Michael, activating all the security protocols they had established. As the night wore on, and a frantic operation was set up to ensure Ethan's safety and that of the others involved, Emily found herself facing an impossible dilemma. Continue the fight for truth and justice, knowing it could cost the lives of those she loved, or back down and allow the evil they had uncovered to continue flourishing in the shadows. With a heavy heart and a mind in turmoil, Emily knew that the decision she made in the next few hours would not only define her fate, but potentially the future of the entire country. Dawn arrived with a palpable tension in the air. Emily, Daniel, Michael, and an elite team from the federal police were gathered in a makeshift operations room, mapping out plans to protect Ethan and counter the imminent threat. "We've located Ethan," one of the agents informed, pointing to a digital map on the screen. "He's safe in one of our shelters. The extraction team picked him up minutes after we received the alert." Emily let out a sigh of relief, but she knew the battle was far from over. "What about the others? Dr. Laura, William Thompson. Everyone is under protection," Michael assured her. "But Emily, we need to discuss our next move. They're cornering us, trying to force us into making a mistake." Daniel, standing beside Emily, held her hand in a gesture of support. Maybe it's time to play our final card. Expose everything at once. Emily bit her lip, thoughtful. The idea was tempting but also incredibly risky. Releasing all the information at once could cause uncontrollable chaos, as well as give the criminals a chance to regroup and strike back. It was at that moment that an idea began to form in her mind. What if we use their own greed against them? All eyes turned to her, intrigued. Explain, Michael asked, leaning forward with interest. Well, we know there are internal divisions within the criminal network, Emily began, her mind working quickly. Politicians distrusting businessmen, corrupt judges fearing betrayal. What if we could exploit those cracks? A slow smile spread across Daniel's face. Provoke an internal war. Exactly, Emily nodded. We leak strategic information, making it seem like some members of the organization are betraying the others. They'll start turning on each other, exposing even more of their operations in the process. Michael scratched his chin, thoughtful. It's risky, but brilliant. It could work, but we'd need to be extremely careful about what information we leak and to whom. The next few hours were spent crafting a meticulous plan. Every piece of information was carefully selected, each target chosen with surgical precision. The operation was dubbed the domino effect. As the sun rose, casting its first rays over New York, the team set the plan in motion. Carefully edited information was leaked to strategic sources, journalists, uncompromised prosecutors, even to less influential members of the criminal network itself. The effect was almost immediate. Within hours, chaos erupted behind the scenes of power. Politicians accused businessmen of betrayal, corrupt judges panicked, and informants emerged from all sides, each trying to save their own skin. Emily and her team watched closely, strategically intervening to maintain momentum. It was a delicate dance between revealing information and controlling the narrative. On the third day of the operation, the big break came. One of the top leaders of the criminal organization, feeling cornered, decided to strike a plea deal. His live televised confession shook the nation, the streets filled with protesters demanding justice. Congress went into emergency session. The Supreme Court found itself under intense pressure to act, but victory came at a cost. Emily and her team became even bigger targets. Assassination attempts were narrowly thwarted. Media smear campaigns tried to discredit their work. It was amidst this turmoil that Emily received an unexpected call. It was Margaret Stevens, the mysterious informant from the park. You've done well, my dear. Margaret's weary voice sounded on the other end of the line, but the endgame is approaching. They're cornered, and that makes them more dangerous than ever. What should we do? Emily asked, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Prepare for the final blow, Margaret replied enigmatically. And remember, sometimes to save the system, you must be willing to sacrifice everything.